You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Before we get to my next guest, I have to share news that I just got that a really remarkable, wonderful Chicagoan, Newt Minow, has passed away. He was 97. It's reported that he died peacefully at home. He was a great citizen, was part of the Federal Communications Commission back in the 1960s, but has been a force that's been so helpful in our democracy for years. He was one of the leaders of the Presidential Debate Commission and has done an enormous amount of work, really up until this week, to try and make sure that the political conversation in America points up, not down. He will be deeply and sorely missed. Now, though, it's my pleasure to once again have Jill Lawrence back on the show. She is an opinion writer and author of the book, The Art of the Political Deal. In the course of a full career paying attention to our politics, she's covered Washington for the AP and for USA Today and is managing editor of the National Journal. Plus, now she's becoming a regular here on this show, so I'm delighted to welcome her back. Hi, Jill.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm always happy to have you because you are so interesting. So can we talk about what you might have heard, because it really scares me, about the impending crash into our debt ceiling? What do you know about this, and what are people saying?
Well, I mean, I've covered so many of these, and they always come to some kind of a rational landing. Now, that is when there were, might I say, more rational people in the Republican Party. This is the problem right now. There were times when Mitch McConnell got involved, and one of those was when Joe Biden was vice president, and they worked out a deal, and some people were mad, but they got a deal, and the debt ceiling didn't crash. And usually what happens is that you get some kind of side deal, that agrees to negotiations at some later point. For instance, when we'll actually need a budget, which would be October 1st, instead of right now. The problem is that no one seems sure whether Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker, can get any concessions from his right wing, which is the wing that made him Speaker by getting a bunch of, concessions from him. So that is a wild card. And, of course, with the dozen or however many Republicans there are in the House who won in Biden districts or who won in moderate districts and would be willing to vote for some reasonable compromise, that combined with Democrats would pass a debt ceiling bill and raise the debt ceiling. On the other hand, there's a Republican rule. I'm getting very deep into Congress nerd type stuff here, but there's this kind of unspoken and sometimes spoken rule that you don't introduce something that's not supported by a majority of the majority. In other words, in this case, a majority of Republicans. And Kevin McCarthy would obviously be leaning on Democrats to pass something like that. So I just don't know. I mean, there are times when I, like many people, I think wish Democrats would be more aggressive. Just ask forgiveness, not permission. Go for the 14th Amendment. Say we can't renege on the debt, so we're just going to pay it. The Constitution says we have to. That's that.
Yeah, I worry about that one only because we can pay the old debt, but we can't borrow more to do it, and that it's a tougher argument. The 14th Amendment, I think, but I'm so worried about this crowd, and discharge also in the congressional weeds is very hard to do.
That is true, and I really hate to think it comes down to a messaging war, like which side feels like they're going to be blamed more for the consequences of this, and there will be terrible consequences. I mean, there'll be consequences if the Democrats and President Biden do not accept some kind of, terrible compromise on this. But I just don't think it can be said enough that Republicans never did this when Donald Trump was in the White House. They let it go through 3 times. It's not supposed to be attached to anything. It's about past debt. It's not about future spending. And there have been things tied to it, like, yes, we'll discuss X, Y, Z, and we promise, if they could get a top line number on spending, they could argue until October 1st or September 30th, about what they would agree to. But it's just, and that's actually another proposal I've heard, just extend it until October 1st so they can parallel things in the meantime.
Yep.
Maybe that makes the most sense from a practical standpoint. The whole thing is just, it's pointless. It's stupid. And
pointless and stupid. I agree with you.
Well, yeah, I don't understand why Republicans want to be identified with a budget that's going to basically crash the economy if it passes as is, and if it doesn't pass as is and they do crash the debt ceiling, then that will also crash the economy. So, I see this lose-lose, but I understand that President Biden's in charge and Democrats are running the Senate, so, it's just one of those, I do feel that people don't need to worry that much. Something will happen. You and I may not be happy about it. We may feel one side has given in too far, or that, considering the House has a 6-vote majority or something, 4-vote margin, 9 extra people, whatever it is, it's very, very slim, and they only have one branch, one half of one branch of the government. So, they're getting out over their skis, I think, as somebody once said to Joe Biden, but it's, I do think the country is going to survive.
Good. Can I ask you about a bunch of other distasteful topics that I think we should touch on? But you can tell me if you want to pass on any of them, because I think they're all revolting. So, for example, the departure of Tucker Carlson. I don't credit Fox with anything they say about the reasons for the break, right? Because I don't credit them with anything they say anyway. But at the same time, I'm astounded that they think it benefits or surprises anyone to provide sort of any more evidence in the form of text messages or anything else, any more evidence that Tucker Carlson is a hateful racist.
I don't think we've seen the end of any of that. We've got more trials to come. The Smartmatic voting company has sued Fox and a bunch of other companies. Dominion has sued 2 other networks. There's suits against Mike Lindell, who appeared on Tucker Carlson. There's a suit against Sidney Powell, who appeared on Tucker. I just think there's the Abby Grossberg suit. He's in the mix. There's lots more that's going to come out, as if this isn't enough. And unfortunately for him, he's got a non-compete until January 2025. So, unless he can persuade people that he's not going to cause them trouble, I just feel like Fox is going to have to be defending him forever, even though he's gone. So I
serves him right.
Don't know what's going to. Yeah, well, here's a true confession. In 2011, a friend of mine named Walter Shapiro and I, who had recently been with a website that closed at AOL, Politics Daily, we took Tucker to lunch at the Mayflower and pitched ourselves to write a liberal campaign blog for the Daily Caller for their 2012 race. Now, this sounds crazy, right? But he wasn't like this then. So the conversation was perfectly normal.
I've heard people say that.
Yeah, I'm one of the multitudes who said, how the hell did this happen? What happened to him? He didn't take us up on our idea. It was a long shot, right? But I could never even imagine taking him out to lunch today. That just wouldn't happen. It was a nice lunch. It was at the Mayflower in downtown D.C., very fancy. And and we were unemployed. But, we did it, and it was really, there's many, many, many people probably who were much closer to him, even though I knew him and had this memorable lunch, who have no clue about how this all happened, this transformation into a person with so much influence. And that that is a problem. I mean, if he decides he wants to run for office or become a key figure in the presidential campaign, I guess you could argue that hosting and moderating a Republican debate might not be direct competition with Fox. I'm sure he could get a sponsor for it, to pay for it. It's a little scary considering where he is these days. He's the foremost purveyor of poisonous disinformation and undermining of democracy, not to mention racism, sexism, and harassment. I mean, it's endless.
Yeah, well, I think we're done with him. I mean, I think we're done with him, but I hope he takes down, more of this crowd as he sinks. And while we're on the topic of sort of revolting spectacles, Donald Trump's defamation trial is in many ways a rape trial, and it goes not just to his character, but to the despicable ways MAGA thinks about women generally. I mean, just that he isn't completely disqualified from everything, based on what the public has heard in this trial, tells you a lot about what the MAGA world thinks about women.
Well, that and abortion, there was a lot going on there, but the deposition was something else, where he said that, first of all, he said Jean Carroll was not his type, which in itself was incredibly offensive.
Revolting.
And then he misidentified her as his former wife, Marla Maples, in a picture. I mean, and reiterating that if you're famous, you can do whatever you want, grab women by wherever, whatever. He doubles down on this stuff. And then while her trial is going on, while his trial is going on, he's online defaming her again. And, to the point where the judge said, you could bring more legal problems on yourself if you keep doing this. I mean, this is, trying to influence the jury, calling her a liar, doing all these crazy things that got him in trouble in the first place. But digging the hole deeper has never discouraged him. I mean, it's one of his favorite things to do, I think. So this, there's all these kind of, who will be the first prosecutor to, indict Trump? Who will be the first judge to rule against Trump? It's just this whole competition, and I think we're seeing some of it. We're seeing some of it begin to shake out now, and the trial is over, I guess, in the Jean Carroll trial. And
they gave him till Monday. They gave him till Monday to say if he wants to testify.
Yeah. So that's, legal experts say that's extremely dangerous, given that you can't tell if he's going to perjure himself. He and
100%.
Yeah, well, he and a lot of his allies really, including his lawyers, have a lot of trouble telling the difference between a courtroom and a press release, an appearance on Fox. It's, this is the law, so we shall see, but it's been a horrible situation. I mean, I think I may have asked you to take a look at the piece I wrote for the Bulwark about Trump and race and his prosecutors. And, he made history in New York by being the first person to be criminally indicted, the first former president. But the people who are involved in these investigations, most of them are making their own history. They're the first black prosecutor in Manhattan, or the first woman or first black woman. There's just a whole lot of history being made, and I don't think we should lose sight of it and kind of the price they're paying, what they have to put up with from him as they do these investigations. But again, what I was saying is it seems like it's kind of shaking out, and Fannie Willison, the prosecutor in Atlanta,
she's been brilliant.
Yeah, and now she's given the time frame. I think it's July 11th to September 1st, and so we should have a hot summer in Georgia. Then my question is, will Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, who's looking at Mar-a-Lago documents on January 6th, will he beat her? I mean, it looks like he's coming to the end of that documents case and to the end of the January 6th case. And then, of course, there's Alvin Bragg, and we'll see what happens in New York. It's interesting. If I could just go on a little longer here. there was Aaron Rupert's Substack interview as a historian named James Long, and he made clear what I have been trying to convince not only people who read me, but also my husband, that this Bragg indictment against Trump was not trivial and that it was really important. And what this historian said is this was the original sin. It helped Trump win the election. And, he did it in order to win the election, and that put in motion all the things he's now being accused of. And, so it's very serious to falsify business records and commit a campaign violation. So I don't, maybe he won't be convicted. Maybe this was a reach, but to me, campaign finance laws, they seem like technicalities, but this is how we prevent our elections from being stolen and unduly
look, the rule of law matters. It's so hard to get campaign laws when you have for example, a Supreme Court that overturns campaign laws. Right. What they did to McCain-Feingold, unimaginably craven and awful, terrible, yet another terrible decision by John Roberts, who thought he knew what would be difficult for electoral politics better than the people who were in it. He had bipartisan agreement. Yeah. Bipartisan agreement on campaign finance stuff. He threw it out. So you are absolutely right. I don't make light of the laws that we've managed to keep are really important.
Yeah, I just wish more people understood the importance of policing campaign finance. The whole Clarence Thomas scandal, which we haven't talked about, or I should say...
Next on my list.
Thomas scandals. Oh, really?
I have a question for you about this. Joe, I have a question. I don't think, people are too afraid of the consequences of the Justice Department going after anybody on the Supreme Court, and I don't think they will. However, is Harlan Crow, is Leonard Leo, can we go after them for bribery? To my mind, I don't know, but to my mind, that's almost like, convicting all of these January 6th rioters and not going after Trump. It's kind of like, I feel better that the Oath Keepers are in jail. I feel better that the Proud Boys are going to jail. I do. I hope they get Trump, but they took his militia down, and that's great. And what will the Republicans, what will these guys do if their chief bribers go to jail? I think it will have a chilling effect.
Well, are you talking about a chilling effect on future appointees, future justices and judges? I think that may in fact be true. Right, but we've got a terrible problem right now. I mean, he needs to resign or be impeached. He needs to be gone. This is unbelievable what's happening.
Well, we need to expand the court, and they should do that now.
Well, and term limits, too.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about term limits. I do. I read the report. Biden had a study done when he first came into office about the court, and it listed reforms that could happen. And there were many of them. Term limits was one of them. One that I thought was really interesting was that there would not be a permanent Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would be federal judges from around the country that rotate onto the Supreme Court for a period of time and then go back to their federal judge seats, so they have to live with the consequences of what they decide. And it wouldn't be, there were all kinds of things that were interesting.
Well, consequences of what you decide, that's an interesting concept. I mean, on the one hand, you're not insulated anymore, but I mean, that's the whole point of the Supreme Court, isn't it, to be insulated? But now we've got people doing things where they say, oh, let abortion be handled by the states, and then, women are near death, and, people are going back to 1800s laws, and doctors are criminalized, and, it's like, no, this is, that would be great to have federal judges have to deal with that. I mean, I shouldn't laugh. It's a tragedy what's going on. But I don't know. I just feel like the other thing we haven't mentioned is the code of conduct, the code of ethics that's enforceable. And it's been suggested to me by Noah Bookbinder and other people concerned about these issues that, there's nobody there like an inspector general who doesn't, the people that are charged with investigating problems at the court could lose their jobs because they're employed by the court. But an inspector general would not be in that danger. So that would be somebody who could investigate things like the leak of the Dobbs opinion or this money, all these donations and payments and contributions and travel and vacations and, the large debts that's been heaped on Clarence Thomas, could also look into the Thomas failure to recuse when his wife was involved in the insurrection, and just all kinds of things that cry out for independent investigation, and there's nobody to do it unless the Justice Department does it, or it's just like they can't be untouchable. They shouldn't be untouchable, and that's the same thing that should be true of former presidents. Another thing this historian made clear is that the United States is very unusual in our reluctance to indict former politicians, former officers, former public officials, including the heads of state.
Not in Illinois, Jill. We put them in jail like candy. We governors, aldermen. We got a long history of it here. It's just presidents.
Nationally, and I know Illinois is very, how shall I say, advanced in this. Yes. No hesitation.
And our politics have improved because of it, actually. We've gotten, yeah, it has made a difference, as I think it will for the country. Can we turn to some, my list of horrors goes on, but I don't want to turn in the time we have left to some happier things. It looks like the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill are starting to have real impacts, positive ones, on our lives. And I wonder what you're thinking about that, like the billions of dollars in private investment now flowing into American manufacturing, and the hiring up of design and construction workers for the building that's about to happen. That's got to be good for the country.
Well, I think you're right. I saw a kind of contrarian view on this the other day, that the Inflation Reduction Act is so, and I guess the CHIPS Act, but mostly the battery stuff, and the Inflation Reduction Act has been so successful that it's going to cost a lot more than CBO and the other estimators projected, because there's money, there's matching money for private investment, and private investors are all over this. And others have noted, and it is sort of ironic that a lot of this is going to the South, that there's going to be an electric battery belt in the South. And I think that's great. I do think it's great. I hope that people connect what's happening to Joe Biden, and in some cases to their Republican senators or representatives who helped push this along. This was a true bipartisan push, and there may be more coming on China, and I think it's great, and I really do think it's happy news. I hope people don't focus too much on the debt. It also looks like maybe the Fed is done raising interest rates, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Well, then we have this great jobs report yesterday, or day before yesterday, so who knows?
Well, but we'll see what happens with inflation, but it has been stabilizing and coming down a little bit. So, and rents and home prices are falling, and we'll just, hopefully these jobs reports just keep coming no matter what. The question is, how long are they going to? And there's also some sense lately, even in places you might not expect, that some of the inflation is due to corporate, bloating of their
profit taking. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So if maybe the focus could shift to that a little bit, just for maybe a couple of quarters. Yep. Yeah.
So I just think that the Democratic governance, and before you were on, I was talking to folks in Michigan, where just the change is so amazing over, what they're getting done. It's a real lesson in what you can do if you take governing seriously.
Well, I think it's a lesson on what you can do if you get rid of the filibuster at the federal level. I mean, Minnesota and Michigan are great examples of just racing to get done everything you can get done. And, Washington last year and the year before was a case study in not being able to pass the kinds of things that would have guaranteed not democratic control, but lots of voters and, access to abortion, access to voting rights, another John Roberts special.
Well, I mean, I'm unhappy that we didn't pass particularly new voting rights legislation, although John Roberts could just as easily have done to that what he's done to everything else. But I want to give, in reality, though, the 117th Congress passed more and more substantive legislation than any time in a generation. So, I mean, they got an enormous amount of stuff done, even with the filibuster. Not everything that you and I would have liked. But you just mentioned, I mean, some of it was bipartisan, like the CHIPS and Science Act, but the Inflation Reduction Act wasn't. Democrats did that.
I know, and I'm going to try to remember your point of view when I look at all the states doing voter suppression laws this year. I mean, there's a glass half empty or half full. You're right. A lot got done. And I just, wish some of the fundamental things like voting had gotten more traction.
Me too. And it was House Bill 1.
5.
Yep. I think we'll get it. It's going to take a little longer. I mean, the evidence,
right.
the Supreme Court told us, John Roberts lectured us, the days of going after voters is over. Right? And then right. So he was wrong. Absolutely fundamentally wrong. We now know that. And then he said on Rucho, the other appalling election decision, where he said the federal court judiciary is closed to gerrymandering because it's beyond our ability. But we're seeing states find it's not beyond their ability, right? State Supreme Courts are considering this, and we're going to learn that he was wrong there too. Appalling.
Well, we're going to see North Carolina. Hopefully somebody. Yeah. No, John Roberts has been a major disappointment, and that's putting it mildly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his grandchildren are going to change their names. But on the Supreme Court, one last question. They were dying to hear the independent state legislature doctrine that would have allowed them to completely screw with elections across the country. They were dying to hear that. And now North Carolina has gone and made it moot by changing the law just because they changed the judges on the Supreme Court, right? A thing that jurisprudence does not smile upon. But they went ahead and legalized the maps that were illegal just a few years ago, and that's the basis for that case. Now they can't hear it, can they?
That is beyond my level of expertise, but I think if they couldn't hear it, they would probably be very happy to not have to get involved in it. But I do hope that many lawsuits happen because there is the representation argument that is so fundamental to our country. Mm-hmm. So maybe the Supreme Court will. I mean, there's a theory out there that the more pressure and the more backlash and the more chaos and the more tragedies that come out of all these, and the more pressure over the ethics, they'll back off a little bit from what they've been doing.
I don't believe it, Jill. I don't believe it. How many people are being slaughtered because they think everybody should have a gun? Doesn't seem to affect them.
Well, that's been happening lately, and let's see what happens with that, because I think states can do better than they're doing, and I think the court can do better than it's doing. And it just seems like people aren't going to stand for it. It hasn't been a voting issue in a lot of places, but I hope it becomes one. The topmost issues. Abortion used to not be a voting issue, and now it is. The Supreme Court used to not be a voting issue. So hopefully all these things are bringing it all to the fore. The disappointment in this sort of despairing part of it is how long it may take to fix all of this, but it's certainly, they've certainly grabbed everyone's attention.
Yep. Well, Jill, we've run out of time. Thank you. It's great, and let's talk again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Right. All right, everybody. That was Jill Lawrence, sort of a remarkable journalist, columnist, who's paid very close attention to the goings on in our country. We're going to take a break and turn to Will Bunch, a different columnist, in just a moment.